we kind of talked about this a little, but I'm still gonna put the question out there. Personally, and yeah, we've talked about this in the past, right?
Yeah.
I'm I'm of the belief that um, that many police departments across the country aren't doing enough to weed out the bad apples. I feel, and this is why I'm posing it to you because I want you to tell me where I'm getting this wrong or not. I feel that the 6 months in the police academy before then going to the 6 month probationary period, I feel like it's inadequate for a lot of these officers, right? Because at the end of the day, like we've been talking about, this is a high stakes job, right?
Hmm.
And a high stress job. And I feel like a lot of them get through the 6 months of the police academy and they're not equipped once they're on the job. And I know in the 6 months they're roaming around with a
Field
supervising
training
officer,
officer.
a training officer. Thank you.
Yeah, an FTO.
Um, FTO, field training officer. So they're roaming around with them for the 6 months after that. But still, they are in the field
Yeah.
where anything can happen. So yeah, all that to say, I've been of the belief that the time in the police academy is not enough. What are your thoughts on that?
It's that's another tough one. I'm I'm a believer in more training, whether it's police academy or whether it's more training after you get out of the academy. That's just my personal belief. You know my background just in martial arts, and I'm the type of person that if I get something wrong at my black belt testing or at a competition, I'm gonna go spend hours in the gym working to improve myself to to get it right. So I'm personally just an advocate of more training in general. Uh, one thing that I will kind of speak on when it comes to that 6 months on the job and the 6 months in the academy, uh, part of it is that you could we could spend 6 months every day for 8 hours a day doing nothing but running scenarios. We could get every officer in the department, pick their brain, and get 6 months worth of scenarios to run after the academy is done. And then the first day you go on the road, you're going to see something that no one's seen before. Um, so there is definitely a level of burnout when you're talking about training and doing scenarios because you can always play the what if game. You can change one minute detail in a scenario. You know, it's the butterfly effect. You change one minute detail, and suddenly the scenario can branch out into 10 different directions. And you change another minute detail. Now we're branching out in another 10 different directions. So I am an advocate of more training, but I do recognize that there's people get tired, people get frustrated. So you got to recognize that human element. Like I, and I'm a firm believer, like police officers, because the job we do is so difficult, we do need to be held to a higher standard. And I do think that, you know, there's some officers that when they're like, oh man, this is boring. It's like, okay, tough it up. If you want to be a police officer, you're going to have to get through this. Like, look at the training that doctors go through, you know, they go through what, 4 years med school, 8 years residency before they get to
Basically,
practice.
like a decade's worth of training.
Yeah, a decade's
Yeah.
worth of training. So I do feel that, you know, police officers should be held to a higher standard, but at the same time, I recognize that one, we're not gonna, like I said, you're not gonna be able to run every scenario that you're gonna see in training, and two, there is a bit of that human element, that stress element that gets in when you feel like you're constantly training, but you're not seeing, you know, but you're not seeing. I don't want to say the result. Kind, you know what? I will say the result because I can actually relate that back to martial arts for me. Um, you know, I do martial arts. Got my fifth degree black belt this year in Taekwondo. Um,
Congrats.
Thank you. But for me, where I kind of see my results is in going to competitions. You know, I'll spend months working on a move, just working it on the bag. Then I'll go from working on the bag to I'll go to when I'm in class, I'll try it on one person in class. I'll try it on another person in class. I'll try it on another person in class. And then at some point, I'm going to be trying it on everybody in class at some point. Then I'm going to go to a competition and I may try it. I may not remember to try it. And then I may go to the competition and say, okay, I definitely need to make sure I try this. I may do it once, may not work. And then I'm like, okay, never mind. I'm going to do what I know works. Or I may do it and I'm like, okay, I got to try to do it. I got to try to do it. But then, you know, now suddenly I'm down and I'm like, okay, now I can't do that. I got to do what I know is going to work. Or it may work and I'm like, all right, sweet, it worked one time and then never works again. But, you know, I kind of get to see that payoff by going, you know, I go to competitions once every couple months. So I kind of get to see that progress. You know, I get those little progress reports in between my training. You know, I might try it on one person at competition. It doesn't work. And I'll say, okay, let me go back to the gym and tweak it a little bit. Next competition, you know, 2 months down the line, I'll try it again. Okay, let me tweak it a little more. And, you know, so I've got something that kind of helps me see that result. Whereas when you're talking about scenarios in the police academy and scenarios like that, the only real result you're getting is just your training officer telling you, okay, you know, that was a good job. This is how I would have handled it. But there's no real stakes to it, if you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, no metric that you can really look at on other than your training officer or your supervisor telling you that you did a good job, or actual real life situation that
Exactly.
occurs and you handle it
And
well or you
you
don't.
handle it, and yeah. So it's because it can be frustrating when you just feel like you're just doing the same thing. Oh, and even if it's not the same scenario, but if you're just constantly doing scenarios, but you feel like, okay, there's no real stakes to this, you know, it like I said, I believe we need to be held to a higher standard, but and anybody would get bored of that. Anybody would start gaming the system to say, okay, when I'm with this instructor, they want to see this, this, and this. And instead of actually training for the scenario, they're training for the evaluator or they're training for the instructor. We both went to college, and I'm sure you know plenty of people that weren't actually trying to learn the subject. They wanted to learn, how does this teacher grade? How does this teacher do this? How do I get the best grade? They weren't actually interested in learning the subject matter at hand.
How do I pass the quiz with the least amount of work?
Exactly.
That's my strategy.
And once again, like I said, I feel like, you know, police officers need to be held to a higher standard than just, how do I pass this with the least amount of work? But at the same time, we've got to recognize that human beings are human beings, and we're going to take the path of least possible resistance. Right. We do need to be held to a higher standard, but at one point does the standard become, okay, now we're losing too many people? I can go ahead and tell you, like, I know people are like, defund the police, there's too many police. I already spoke on it. You know, most agencies are running on under what they feel like they need to be running on as far as budget. And I'll go ahead and say it as well, manpower. We've had a now hiring sign for the past 3 years that I've worked at my agency. We've had a now hiring sign up right outside the jail for the past 3 years. I think it went down for about a month one time, and then it went right back up the next month, and it was just like, okay, nope, we need more people. And I would venture to say that there's a lot of agencies like that around the country that are operating, you know, doing the best they can with, you know, the people they've got. So if you do start losing people, and once again, I'm not saying, you know, there are people that do need to be lost. I'm not going to sit here and say anybody that wants to be a police officer, just give them a badge and let them go out there. Like, and I know people say, oh, 6 months for the academy is not enough. The academy is tough. Like, it weeds people out. The academy does weed people out. The academics weed people out. The physical standards weed people out. Shooting, driving, that weeds people out. There's a lot in the academy that weeds people out. Could we extend it a little bit to maybe weed out those that aren't strong mentally enough to, you know, push through that last little bit and not try to game the system and actually, like, okay, I want to do this job properly. I take this seriously. Could we make it a little tougher to you know, weed out some of those others? Sure. But at the same time, where's that fine line where now you're also weeding out people that would be good police officers, people that, you know, would be, you know, would never have a bad use of force or a bad shooting in their career, but they just have trouble focusing on the same thing for so long, or they just, have trouble in that training environment and they're eager to get into, the quote unquote action.
Okay. All right. So what I got from that is there is a shortage of police officers, despite the fact that, well, I'll say my thought process was that they're just hiring anyone. But they aren't just hiring anyone, because you're saying that the academy is weeding people out, even though some still make the cut that probably shouldn't have. So it sounds like some are making a cut that shouldn't have, but also there is a reduction in, what's the word I'm looking for, in an interest for people to join the academy, people to join the police force or law enforcement.
There is, and I actually read a very interesting article about this like years ago, before I even considered becoming a deputy. It was very interesting to me. They attributed the change in police attitude to 9/11. Not saying that police started looking at it as, oh, it's a war, it's us against them, but that, after 9/11, there was this upswelling of patriotism. Everybody was proud to be an American. Everybody, loved their country. And you had all these intelligent, well-spoken, well-mannered, physically fit young people going to the military, and not as many of them were going to police academies. And it was a really interesting article. I read it years ago, like I said, way before I got into law enforcement. And he kind of, I don't even remember who it was or what kind of study he did, but he said, attributed a difference in how policing was being done pre-2000 or pre-2001 as to post-2001, as far as the candidates that were applying to police agencies, and then, what was being done to make up for the shortfall of what he kind of perceived as like, the ideal candidates. More of them were going to the military rather than going to the police department. And it was
I was going to say, if you're able to find that article, please send it my way, and I'll drop it in the description below, so that others can read into it as well.
It was, like I said, it was something that I hadn't even thought about until I read it. I was like, that's a very interesting opinion. Sorry, my cat's about to get in the camera.
No problem. Well, you know what? Then let's wrap up with one last question. So we've talked about increasing funding and emphasis on mental health facilities, possibly having better or increasing the continuing education for police officers to help them handle some not so typical situations. And maybe I think you landed on it being a positive thing if there could be some national strategy around hitting some of these issues we face, not just leaving it for each state or each municipality to handle. So the last question I have is, other than those that we've already talked about, do you have any other suggestions as far as like how we can wrap our hands around these issues that we're facing as a nation, whether it's police related suggestions or anything else? The floor is yours.
I think my biggest issue with the criminal justice system in general in this country is the recidivism rate. And I think part of that is it's a societal problem, because you look at what happens when someone, because here's how things are supposed to work. You commit a crime, you get arrested, you go to jail. If you're found guilty of that crime, you go to prison. And people get this confused. Going to jail is not the punishment. Typically, going to jail is just to make sure to ensure that you go to court. If you go to jail and you post your bond, basically you're paying that fee, saying, okay, I'm gonna show up for court. when people don't get bond, it's because the crimes are so heinous. They're like, we're not going to give this person a chance to escape, or different circumstances like that. But jail is not a punish. Is punitive the word? I think punitive is the word I'm looking for. Jail is not a punitive measure. It's not for punishment. It's detention until trial. After you're convicted, you go to prison, and that's where your punishment comes in. Just real quick, so when people talk about the Eighth Amendment and cruel and unusual punishment, it doesn't apply to someone working in a county jail because the inmates in there are not convicted. They're in pretrial detention. Now, of course, there are still some things that you still can't have cruel and unusual punishment or things like that in a county jail either. But it's just funny to me sometimes. Oh, that's violation of my Eighth Amendment right, and it's like, well, actually, it's more a violation of your 14th Amendment right, but I like where your head's at. But no, sir, sorry. Eighth Amendment is prison. But yeah, so how it should work is you get charged with a crime, you go to jail, you go to trial, you get found guilty, you go to prison, you do your time, right? You do the crime, you do the time. What should happen is after you get released from prison, we as a society should say, okay, this person has paid their debt to us. Let's welcome them back in. But we don't do that. If you get convicted of a felony, even if it's possession of a Schedule 1, because you were, or you know what, what's a Schedule 1? Heroin. Heroin is Schedule 1. Maybe you are opiates. You got some Oxycontin from a friend, or, whatever it may be. Maybe you had a pill addiction, and you get busted for that. Possession of a Schedule 1. It's a felony. Now, every time you apply for a job, they're going to ask, have you been convicted of a felony? And you check yes. How many people does that disqualify right off the bat? So now we're telling you, hey, you did this crime, you paid your debt to society, now you've got to rejoin society. But hey, no, actually, any good job where you'd actually be able to make money and contribute, we don't want you here. We don't want you here. So now you've got someone that, maybe they got their education in prison, maybe they had an education before, but for whatever reason, they committed a crime and now they're getting out of prison. Once again, you've got that little box that says, have you committed a felony? Now, how many jobs is that going to disqualify them from right off the bat? I forgot all about this. Look at Scott Lang, Ant-Man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Dude was brilliant. He goes to prison for a felony and he's working at Baskin Robbins. And what does he ultimately have to do? He has to go to his buddy and say, okay, let's do this job. Turns out it's Hank Pym. He becomes Ant-Man. But, in real life, there's no Hank Pym there waiting to give you superpowers and a super suit when you turn back to crime. The only thing that's waiting is, okay, you're going right back to jail.
Right.
And I think that's a societal problem that we as a society have decided, okay, if a person commits a crime, we're done with them. When how it should work is that they commit the crime, they do their time, and they have an opportunity to reintegrate in society. I watched a 2020 special on German prisons, and one of the interesting things about that is I think it was Germany. I'll have to see if I can find the special to make sure I'm telling you the right country. But one of the interesting things was when you get convicted of a crime, in America, it's public record. Over there in Germany, it's not public record. So all you can see is that this person went to jail or prison or whatever, but there's you can't find out what they were convicted of. I want to say it's Germany. I'm going to double check that. So, we're not slandering Germany or whatever country like that. But I thought that was interesting because I was like, okay, so now we've already got a system in place that says, okay, you've made a mistake, but we're not going to judge you based on your mistake. And then it was interesting. They showed just the prison environment over there was really geared more towards rehabilitation and education. I can't really speak on the prison system in America because I don't work in a prison. I've never worked in a prison, so I can't speak on, what sort of programs they have for rehabilitation, that sort of thing. But like I said, what I've seen in society is people do their time, they pay their debt to society, but then it's more difficult for them to rejoin society than it would be for someone else. You saw that with Ant-Man. A lot of times you see that with older people in like middle management positions or something like that. In one career, you get if they lose their job in one company and then they apply to another company, Well, they've got, years of experience. They, expect to come in at a certain and be compensated based on, their experience, their knowledge, what they can bring to the table. But how many companies say, okay, well, rather than paying you what you're worth because of all the years you've had, we're going to bring in this young person that, is fresh out of college. They've got the same degree as you do, and we can pay them, however much, $50,000 less than we'd be paying you, because they're not coming with this excess baggage. I feel like that's kind of how we look at
Felonies.
People in general is, hey, what baggage you have? No, I want less baggage. You're younger. Yeah, come on, less baggage. Oh, you've got a criminal record? Nah, because now if you do something, I'm going to be held liable. Nah, I'm not going to hire you. Now if you do something, people are going to think, oh, you hired that guy? You knew he was going to do something. People don't change. He's a felon. Of course he was going to do that. So we have this idea of society that, in American society, I feel at least, that we don't give people second chances. I know we say, oh, everybody deserves a second chance, but in practice, I haven't really seen that.
Right.
And that's probably my biggest issue with the criminal. And like I said, that's more of a societal thing. How many people turn back to, stealing cars or selling drugs because that's their only way they can make money. They get out of prison, maybe they're on house arrest, or maybe they're on probation, and probation says, hey, you've got to have a full-time job, and no one will hire them. They can get a job at like a warehouse, stacking boxes for 12, 14 hours a day, or they can get the jobs that nobody else wants. And we expect these people to just be happy and be happy with the scraps that we're leaving you, but don't come too close to the table because, you can doing crime because here we're giving you these scraps. So you better not go steal anything because we're giving you this. Well, hey, no, you can't steal that loaf of bread. You got these scraps here that we're giving you. So I think, yeah, that's kind of my soapbox. That's been my soapbox for a long time. Once again, before I even got into law enforcement, it was just like, we need to change that attitude so that we don't have so many repeat offenders and career criminals that go in from the time they're 17, 18 years old. And then you've got a guy that's 40 or 50 that all he's ever known is hustling or crime or slanging dope or whatever, because he never really got a chance to do anything else.
I really appreciate your point of view on that, because you are coming at it, well, as a man first, but also as a law enforcement officer, understanding that there is that problem of people being in that constant cycle of, they commit a crime, they serve their time, they get out, and they have to commit a crime again, just because there's nothing to give them a leg up or it's to help them veer away from that path. And I thank you for, even though you call it your soapbox, for taking the time to address that issue. It's a really big problem, and I think resolving that would do a world of good for this country. I think that's a good place to wrap it up. I want to thank you for your time and for your insight on all these things. One thing I do want to add is Dayne is also a stand-up comic. So right now you have a minute, 2 minutes. Plug yourself. Tell them about your socials. I'll put it in the description below. Go for it.
You giving me a minute to plug myself? How, Sway? How am I going to do it in a minute?
55 seconds.
All right. So like Zino said, I do stand-up comedy. I've been in Taekwondo since I was 8. I've been boxing as well. I got videos on my YouTube channel. I got a few videos on my YouTube channel, but not a whole lot. Most of my stand-up is on my Instagram, Turner Dayne 21. My Twitter, hold on. I had my Twitter pulled up a second ago. Let me pull it up now.
If he doesn't get it in the time limit, it'll be in the description.
Oh my gosh, my phone is betraying me. But I do stand-up comedy. Zino's come to a couple of my shows. He can tell you I get a few chuckles out of the crowd.
Yeah, quarantine
man
chuckles.
of many talents here.
No, I'm kidding.
Quarantine chuckles?
He's actually really good.
Yeah, if you've been sitting in the house staring at the walls for the last 3 months, you'd probably think I was funny. All right, here we go. Here's my Twitter page, ChalkThun21.
Okay.
ChalkThun21 at ChalkThun21. Dayne Turner.
All right, Dayne. Thanks. I really appreciate this. Thanks for being the first guest of ZZ Features. And
No problem. Hope to come back.
Yeah, you'll be seeing the video up there on YouTube fairly soon.
All right, and hopefully next time the content won't be as serious. You know, we can have fun like our usual conversations.
Right, I'll bring you back as a stand-up comic, and you can tell us about that industry. All right, thank you, and that is a wrap.